Imagine a species of humans, perfectly balanced. Are we born with a moral compass pointing toward universal compassion, or are we simply pre-wired for self-interest and conflict? This question, are we fundamentally good, or are we fundamentally capable of evil, is arguably the oldest, most persistent debate in human thought. It's not just an academic parlor game, it has defined civilizations, fueled religions, and written the laws that govern our deepest fears and highest aspirations. For millennia, philosophers, theologians, and scientists have argued over the source code of human morality, attempting to determine if our goodness is a divine gift, a social construct, or merely the byproduct of complex biological machinery. The context of this debate spans from Plato's ideal state to the stark warnings of Thomas Hobbes. Plato, for instance, believed that the ideal human life was one guided by reason, suggesting that our capacity for virtue was innate and required rigorous education to flourish. Fast forward to the Enlightenment, and the debate took a dramatic turn with the contrast between John Locke and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Locke suggested that we are born with a tabula rasa, a blank slate, which is then written upon by our environment and laws. Rousseau, however, offered a more radical vision, positing that humanity originally existed in a state of natural innocence, the noble savage, and that it is the establishment of society, property, and civilization that corrupts us. This tension, nature versus nurture, is the bedrock of the entire argument. On one side, you have the proponents of inherent goodness. Think of the optimistic strains of Eastern philosophy, or the Stoic idea that virtue is within our control, regardless of external chaos. They suggest that evil is not a biological default setting, but a failure of reason, a misapplication of self, or a lack of proper understanding. On the other side, we find the stark realism of thinkers like Hobbes. Hobbes, writing in the shadow of English Civil War, painted a terrifying picture in Leviathan. In a state of nature, life would be solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. For Hobbes, man is naturally self-regarding, and without an overpowering social contract, a government, we would descend into perpetual war. To try and crystallize this debate, consider a thought experiment involving the Island of Echoes. Imagine a group of people stranded on a pristine, isolated island. There are no pre-existing structures, no history, and no outside influences. They are given tools, food, and the perfect opportunity to build a society from scratch. If you observe them over decades, do they organically form complex systems of mutual aid, shared rituals, and empathetic justice? Or do they inevitably devolve into tribal warfare, resource hoarding, and cycles of violence? The answers we seek are buried in our own behavioral patterns, and the theories range from the hopeful, that our capacity for empathy is primary, to the deeply pessimistic, that our capacity for cruelty is inevitable, and that civilization is merely a temporary, fragile veneer over a wild core. When we look at the real world, this question moves from philosophy to sociology, and it becomes intensely personal. We see it reflected in everything from international humanitarian law to social media discourse. When we witness genocide or global crises, the immediate human tendency is to ask, how could they do that? Do we blame genetics, poverty, systemic oppression, or a failure of collective will? The modern psychological approach tends to synthesize these views, suggesting that morality isn't a switch, it's a complex, highly responsive system influenced by our evolutionary needs, our cultural norms, and the cognitive biases that make us tribal. But let's confront the most powerful objection to the notion that we are inherently good. The strongest argument against natural goodness is the sheer persistence and scale of systemic cruelty. If our default state was benevolence, why do atrocities happen with such organized, cold efficiency? Why does propaganda, which dehumanizes entire groups of people, work so flawlessly? The counterargument suggests that our fundamental nature is not virtuous, but rather adaptable. We are perfectly designed for cooperation when it benefits us, and for brutal elimination when it doesn't. Ultimately, I believe the debate is a false dichotomy. The idea that we are purely good or purely evil is a profound oversimplification. Our nature is not a singular point on a spectrum, but a dynamic tension itself, a perpetual wrestling match between the innate drive for tribal survival and the cultivated capacity for universal empathy. We are, perhaps, creatures defined by our capacity for contradiction. We are capable of building cathedral-like systems of justice, and we are also capable of burning them down with a single, poorly thought-out act of violence. We don't start good, and we don't start evil. We start potential. Our moral life is not a destination we reach, but a constant, difficult act of becoming.